Welcome and thanks for joining us. My guest today is Erica Fensom, the Vice President of Corporate Affairs at DocuSign. Erica, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Just to get the conversation started here and just to level set, let's start the conversation pretty broadly here. What does it mean from your perspective to deliver a digital-first public experience, and why is that so essential to meeting the needs and expectations of the public in this day and age?
It's incredibly important. So I want to set the context. Every year, the government provides information and services to more than 400 million individuals, families, and businesses. And this work is essential, but it's difficult. It's been reported that the American public spends 10.5 billion hours yearly completing government paperwork. And importantly, over $140 billion in potential benefits stay unclaimed because of complicated or outdated processes. So what should we do about it? Well, I believe that we should embrace a digital-first experience for government, and government agencies have an opportunity to change all of that and help affect the lives of millions of people in the United States. So if you think about it, the way that we're currently receiving information and services has fundamentally changed. Whether we're buying a cup of coffee or a car, we expect a fast, secure, and mobile-first experience. So what if we could experience those same benefits when applying for a permit or requesting housing assistance? This is an amazing opportunity for the government to be taking a digital by design approach in how they deliver services. And I believe there's a huge opportunity for government agencies to create better customer experiences.
Okay. And that huge experience, or the huge opportunity for a better experience, really centers around a couple of things. The 21st Century Idea Act, which has been on the books for a number of years now, predates the COVID-19 pandemic. And we've seen more recently from the Office of Management and Budget some guidance reminding agencies just how important these principles are and to implement the 21st Century Idea Act even further. To look at it this way, how did the COVID-19 pandemic shine a spotlight and prioritize the need for better digital services from government, which was the whole point of this act in the first place?
COVID really did put a spotlight on the need for agencies to provide better digital services, and agencies moved in that direction just out of sheer necessity. So everyone was remote during the pandemic, but still needed access to critical services that were delivered by the government. And for agencies in particular, they had to adapt to a remote workforce. And so this was also dealing with increased demand for services and the rollout of new programs. It was a huge time for transformation. So I want to take HHS, for example. They faced a huge challenge and took a digital-first approach and then met the needs of their public and significantly improved their processes in a short amount of time. So during COVID, there was an additional $175 billion in grants that was allocated to its programs to support families, workers, and healthcare providers. So they took a digital-first approach at how they were going to deliver this program and shortened the time it took to distribute grants from as long as 4 months to as little as 5 days. So that said, the pandemic also exposed just how much room there is for improvement for agencies to provide better digital services, and how agile government agencies can be to change. So this is what's really exciting, is the opportunities to take that and move it further. So we at DocuSign believe the world has shifted and these digital experiences are here to stay. So we have an opportunity to sustain this momentum. We've seen some great progress, and that's why the recent guidance is so important, and the funding of the Technology Modernization Fund to address issues like legacy IT systems are so important. We're really excited about the opportunity to help and support government as they're making this change.
Well, of course, it's a no-brainer that customers really expect these services to be available online, to be available in a mobile-friendly format. But as you and I well know, there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes to make that possible and make that user-friendly. Just tell me a little bit more about what the challenges are along the way to make this possible, and also reminding agencies just the value proposition of making this possible and doing all this hard work behind the scenes.
It's important to realize just how many interactions the government has with the public. So each month, There are 2 billion visits to government websites and over 80 billion hours of interactions with the public. That's a huge opportunity. And more than 50% of those interactions are done through a mobile device. Plus, many of these experiences require some type of form to apply for a service or a benefit. However, only 2% of government forms are currently digitized, and 45% of websites have not been designed to work on mobile devices. Plus, a large percentage, over 60% of websites have potential accessibility issues. So in the words of our federal CIO, Claire Martirana, we can and we must do better. So how can we address some of these changes? There's a few things that agencies are needing to address. The first is definitely addressing legacy IT systems. Second, we still have some outdated policies that still require a physical signature or a paper document in some instances, or some in-person verification of identity. There's sometimes lack of funding or resources for tech upgrades. We are also seeing in the public sector that there are some staffing shortages, and it's important to hire professionals who understand the tools of the future, and that includes artificial intelligence. So we at DocuSign help public sector organizations connect and automate how they navigate their systems of agreements. And we offer e-signature. We're the world's #1 way to sign electronically, and we help over 5,000 local, state, and federal organizations to transform manual processes into automated digital experiences. And so for us, that's why we support the OMB's guidance and framework to help government departments. It's really an opportunity to change how governments are delivering government services. And we're also supporting funding for TMF and similar efforts at the state level. So in short, there's a lot of work to be done, but we're really excited to help bring better government services to our communities.
One of the goals behind 21st Century IDEA and this more recent guidance is really setting a higher standard for accessibility for online government materials. But let's unpack that a little bit further. Just what are some of those best practices to make sure that online resources are available for everyone, regardless of their their capacity, mentally or physically? I know a lot of physical disabilities, and the conversation around Section 508 is really how a lot of these conversations around better digital experiences started in the first place.
The aim of this guidance is really to help agencies understand what they need to do to modernize their websites and digitize services. And with that, it's really important to ensure all people can access the information they need, including people of diverse abilities, as you mentioned. And we know that more than 60% of government websites have potential accessibility issues. So this is a really important area to address. The recent guidance makes it crystal clear that agencies should address this. So with a digital-first approach, agencies should design with the user experience in mind, including following accessibility standards, testing for accessibility, and conducting inclusive research to consider the needs of people with diverse abilities. And the guidance is very clear.
And we were talking pretty extensively about e-signatures, and that is a huge part of this legislation, the 21st Century IDEA Act. How is this such a game changer for the federal government being able to improve its level of service? And, one thing I think that's huge about all of this is just the trust that's baked into that electronic signature, because at least from my perspective, when I sign a signature electronically, it can look a little bit differently from how I might sign it on physical pen and paper.
So modernizing forms is essential in any digital service strategy. In government, they're usually the first step to obtaining a government service or benefit. And the electronic signature component is when an agreement is made between a constituent and the government in order to access services or a benefit. Now, unfortunately, filling those forms out online can be a frustrating experience if they're not designed well. People can abandon them. And we know that more than $140 billion of benefits goes unclaimed each year due to complicated process. And the form can be a very critical point for that customer experience when they're accessing services. So some agencies have started to offer PDF versions of the form. This is a right step in the right digital direction. But if they're not mobile friendly, they aren't a great user experience for the person who's filling them out or for the person who's processing the information at the agency. So this can sometimes mean that data captured in a form needs to be manually transferred into another system of record. And this slows the process. This leaves room for human error. So this is why using something like DocuSign web forms is much better. Agencies can easily provide a digital experience that captures key data and populates content into agreements for electronic signature. It allows instant connectivity with a department system of record and allows for dynamic content to be populated as information changes in the web form. So as signatures are a critical component of that moment of agreement, it's important that that experience is well thought out, well planned, and safe and secure for your citizens.
And Erica, you mentioned a moment ago the Technology Modernization Fund and how that's a key piece of the implementation puzzle here. Of course, no agency likes an unfunded mandate. So just explain to our audience a little bit more about how valuable that TMF is to make these goals a reality.
In order to modernize the experience in government, it's incredibly important to have the right funding and resources for our agency leaders to implement these changes. We're very supportive of the TMF funds and know that in order for there to be true change in government, there needs to be an ability to upgrade legacy IT systems, bring in new solutions, and also work with industry partners to help implement the best-in-class solutions to allow better citizen experiences when they're interacting with government. Funding is a really key part of that.
All right. And, one other thing to think about here is just recognizing that when it comes to implementation, it's going to be a spectrum for agencies. There's going to be people who are leading the charge on implementation, and there's going to be agencies that are a little bit behind the curve. For those agencies that are just getting started with implementation, what are the things that are most impactful or most essential that you'd recommend they get started on first?
Well, and importantly, if you haven't gotten started on your digital transformation, you need to act now. So according to the OMB, you have less than 5 months until March to ensure you're working to deliver a new integrated digital experience. And the first thing you should do if you haven't started is to identify a digital experience delivery lead. So you need someone who's going to take point on that digital by design strategy with security in mind and help set that vision for your agency. The next step is to review your top facing public websites, see where you have the widest audience first, and start on those experiences. And this is where you will have the most impact for your digital transformation. Then you should get started. So redesign with the user experience in mind, start with your forms and create web experiences, and then ensure accessibility for those experiences. As you're doing this, it's important to seek feedback from the public and also your industry partners. We can help guide you in terms of the best practice for the best way to deliver those services. One example we have is we know that SMS text notifications have a much higher preference rate by consumers. It's over 2.5x the number of people who prefer to receive a notification about a status of a loan or an application or a benefit over an email. So this is another opportunity for government to again expand and think about how they're delivering services and notifying their constituents. So companies like us, we provide leading digital services for the world's biggest brands. We have over 1.4 million customers and 1 billion users. We can help.
One thing that really just is impressed upon me just hearing all of this is just in a lot of ways, this is government playing catch up with what's already been available in terms of customer experience in the private sector, that there's this higher bar that customers have of how they interact with anyone in the public sector or the private sector. And government agencies are trying to make it as seamless working with them as it is working with your bank or other financial institution, or, any service under the sun, ordering a pizza, for example. In terms of improving that level of service, what can agencies learn from the private sector, which has already spent considerable time and effort to improve that customer experience?
There are some great examples of consumer experiences that also can be applied to government service experiences. And to the most extent possible, government should focus on the user experience and then reducing friction in that experience. And this means avoiding unnecessary signature requirements to the greatest extent possible, not requiring a handwritten or wet signature, and really thinking about how you can change that experience from a complete end-to-end when you start the application to when you're receiving the application to notifying the user about status. There is a number of ways all along the customer journey that government can approve that. So trust is also essential in government, and the same goes in the private sector as well. And so agencies should ensure that their e-signature experiences have strong authentication, workflows, and also data encryption. It's also important for a comprehensive audit trail when you're thinking about these experiences. So whilst government has their own method for government services, something that's very similar with highly regulated industries, security is key, and that's a key part of trust. So you need to make sure that your electronic signature solution has a high degree of security and trust.
And one other, I think, big overarching theme of all this is just meeting those customers where they are, that by and large, customers expect these services to be online. They expect them to be in that mobile-friendly format. I think it's just worth spending a couple more minutes there. By and large, are customers expecting these services to be available online, or, are they expecting them to be available in other formats? If people want to say, pick up the phone and call an agency, I guess the question here is just how do you manage that omni-channel experience?
The public expects an experience with the government similar to what they're used to when engaging with any other company in their day-to-day lives. And there is an expectation as well, if there is a need where they need help, that the government agency is reachable. So it's important to think about the full way that you may be engaging with your customers, which include your constituents and the public. And omni-channel is part of that. So that includes taking a look at how you're servicing and processing requests for services. It includes your help desk and help services. It includes your back-end processes and workflows. Again, there are so many different areas where there are opportunities to fully digitize an end-to-end process and workflow that will help ultimately make that experience better for your citizens.
Well, Erica, I really wanted to circle back on this idea of trust, because these services are moving online, but so are these cyber criminals. They are impersonating government agencies, and they're telling people that they owe them money, or that here's a link to move on to the next phase of this government service. And of course, when they click that link, it's a malicious link and it leads to all sorts of problems. To circle back on the idea of trust in all of this, what can agencies do to ensure that when they are legitimately reaching out to this population, to the public, that they can communicate that this is truly the people that they are, the agencies that they are, and that the public legitimately understands and trusts that this is a legitimate federal government communication?
Trust is incredibly important for government. And when you're designing a government service, it's important to think about all of the messages that a constituent might receive. There's some really good guidance in the OMB memo that actually shares some of the way that you should design your website experience or your communication so that a customer knows that this is coming from an authentic government agency. It's incredibly important that government agencies work with a vendor with really strong security. And this means strong authentication and encryption for data in transit and in rest. It means secure workflows, and also making sure that you're operating in an environment that is authorized for FedRAMP and with IL4 authorization. So anytime that you're looking at creating a government service or communication with your constituents, it's incredibly important to work with a trusted provider that takes security seriously. And this includes extra protection with detecting malware. It includes having dispersed servers to allow for continuity of operations planning. It's incredibly important that government agencies pick the right partner from a security perspective.
All right. Well, Erica, we've covered a lot of ground here, but I think we're going to have to leave it there. I'd like to thank today's guest, Erica Fensom, the Vice President of Corporate Affairs at DocuSign. I'm your moderator, Jory Heckman, and you're watching Federal News Network. For more on this discussion, visit federalnewsnetwork.com and search DocuSign.